Okay, so let's start. This file. Okay, so it's a money transfer application that I've been thinking about for a while. So we're going to build both the front end and then the back end as well. So alright, so we start off by saying that npm init-y start our npm package. So we have a package.json here, and then also we try and create a folder by saying server, or let's rename it to backend rather, backend, and then we create our server.js file, which will be our entry point for our backend. And then we move on to installing our packages. We will need Express, Mongoose, and then .env, and then Express Mongoose.env. Okay, these are the packages that we will need for now. We probably would have to install more later. So let's wait for our packages to install. Alright, then we start off our application by saying coming to the package.json and typing in our script in here. First off will be our server, and then we have our server.js. No, we have our node server backend server.js. And we run our script by coming to our terminal and saying npm run server, which then starts our server. And let's test if our server is working by saying console.log server started. Alright, okay, so we have our server started file. Server started running in our console. Okay, so when we check our package.json file and we check our dependencies, we have Express in here, .env, and then Mongoose. Okay, some of the parameters that we'll need will be a little bit sensitive, like our passwords, our URLs that we would define. So we probably would need to have a .env file. And then we have our ports in here. Let's initialize our port to port 5000. Then our Mongo URI to Mongo. Let's bring it small letters, Mongo UB and local host, and then we say money transfer, which will be our database. Alright, let's come back to our server and then initialize our Express. Initialize Express, bring in Express by saying require Express, and then our app will be initializing the Express app. Also, let's bring in our .env to bring in our environment variables by saying require .env.config. Alright. Most times when we create our .env file, we probably would need to have to restart our server. by pressing Command C in the terminal. Command C. Let's clear the terminal and say run npm run server again to start off our server again. All right. So we bring in our port by saying process.env.port, or we run on port 5000. All right. So we listen to port here, passing a callback and say server started, which should start our server. All right. So when let's console.log port, we are running on port 5000 in here. All right. Let's also set up our middleware by saying update use express.json, and also update use express.url encoded, and then you say extended to be true. Okay, we're done with our middlewares, which will sort of pass the data that the client will send into a JSON. Then we can get the data through the request.body. All right, so we bring in our .env file. We have our express. We set up our initialize our app, and then we also defined our port, and then we are listening to the request from the users from our port, which is port either the process.env, or we listen to it from port 5000. Okay, let's come in here and then also define our route. And then we say, first of all, we're going to create the user route, which will be our authentication system. So we say user routes.js, and then we can actually try and test if our app is working by saying, let's say test if our app is working by saying app.get, let's say users, we pass in our request response, and then we send the JSON message as okay, get all the users. I have a plugin that I usually use to make a backend request by creating the request.rest file. Then I'll say get users, and then it should be a get request, and then our endpoint will be HTTP local call host, which will be for 5000, and then we say users, and then we send our request, which will give us get users in here, which is coming from, let's try and make this smaller, which is coming from here. But then I don't want to define all my routes in here. I'd rather would want to separate my route into different files to make it more optimized. So that's how come I'm trying to bring in the user routes in here. Then we'll bring it into our server. Let's move this one here. All right. So inside our user file, we have to bring in our router from Express, and then we initialize our router as well, and as well we export our router in here. So for the get request to an endpoint of user, we bring in our request and response, and then let's send a JSON message to get all users like we did initially. From there, then we try and then set up our routes in here by saying app.use, let's say when the user hits an endpoint of users, I'd want to use a user routes. Did we bring our user in our user route? No. So we say the const user routes should be require will be in our routes user routes in here. Perfect. So let's test our endpoints to see if again we get that. So that brings us our user routes. Pretty simple and straightforward. All right. So this will sort of like get us all the user routes that we have defined in here, and also in an event where there's a post request to / users, I want to pass my request. Actually, most of the Mongoose functions is an async. It's sort of like a promise, so we would have to make a callback function and it's async function so that we can await for responses that we get from our database. So initially, let's try and test this endpoint by saying get create user, and then try and test our endpoint. Let's say create user, and there should be a post request, and then we'll go to our endpoint will be HTTP localhost port 5000 and users, and define our contents type to be application /JSON. Let's test the endpoint to see if it works. Yeah, create users. Perfect. All right. Let's also try and then define our user model. Which is like the setup for how data will be stored in the model. But first off, I would also want to reduce this route further by having to also create our controllers as well. Let's create a controllers first, which will sort of like where the business logic will reside out of, because I don't want to define all my controllers here or all my routes here, which will sort of like clog this file. So in here, inside my backend, I'll create controllers file, controllers folder, and then I'll say user controller.js, and then I'll define my function by saying get users and async request response, and then let's send same message by saying get all, right, by saying get, what's happening, right, oh, we got the file extension wrong, so let's rename it, rename .js. Okay, so we'll say const get users should be an async function, pass the request response object, and then message get all users, and then we export this function to be get users. We'll come back into our route and then use it by having to import the get users function from the controllers. First off, where are we? We are in a route, so we have to come up a little forward and controllers, user controllers. So instead of writing a callback function like this, we just have to put in a function in here, and it works. All right, let's test the endpoint by saying send, and it still works. All right, so the same thing in here inside our user route by saying coming into our controllers, and then we say const create user, also an async function passing a request response, and then rest.json message create user, then export create user function here. Then we bring it into our route by importing it here, and then we use that. We take off this one and say create user in here. All right, so let's test off the create user endpoint. See it works. Create user. All right. Inside our backend, we then have to create our model, which will be the database, the database structure of our user collection. So we can do model, then we create our user, model.js, then we bring in Mongoose, say require Mongoose, then once user schema plus new mongoose.schema, when the name should be a type of string, required should be true. We also want email type of string, required to be true, and then as well want a password. Contacted type of string, required to be true as well. Then again, also we want our created at and then updated at function parameters as well by coming in here, and then we say timestamps to be true. Yeah. Usually, I would want to create an account model as well to keep track of the account of the user, by maybe probably having to add an account here, but and saying type should be number, but I don't want to do this. I'd want to create a separate model for the account, so we keep the two separate, and we come in here and do model.export equals to mongoose.model, which should be our user, and we pass our user schema. Simple as that. Okay, I think that'll be it for our user schema. So we have a name, which should be a type of string and should be required. Email type should be a string. Password should be a string. You can as well add other parameters like phone numbers and other things, but we're not going to do this in this tutorial. Yeah, you can feel free to add that one. All right, so let's come back into our controllers. and then bring in our user model. Saying user equals to require model user model. Yeah, everything works. Okay. So now let us try and then create the user, first of all, by creating a try catch function. I would say const equals to, there are two ways you can actually do this. First, you can use a new user, and then we get the data from the user with the request body. So we have the name, email, password, which will be sent from the user. We pass them here, password in here. Then we send back our status code of 201, which will mean that the resource has been created, then and a JSON, and pass the user. In an event of an error, we console.log the error.message, and then we send back status code of 500 and a JSON with a message of let's say internal server error. We've actually not saved the user in our database. Yes, but this will only exist in memory, but I'll show you how we can also how we can save the user into our database. But let's test off our endpoint first. Great user, it has an ID. 1, 2, something went wrong. Okay, we actually didn't send our data in here, so we bring in a name. No, say name. Let's use name should be Kofi Ahin, and then email should be kofiahin@gmail.com, and then we need our password to be essays password. Actually, we will have to encrypt our password, but for now we will leave it as at that, because it's not safe to keep plain password in our database. So let's send off our request again to see if it works, and then it works. So but then if you check our database, that has not been stored. So what we can do inside our user controller will be, instead of saying new user, we can await user.create, save, and then let's send a request to see if user has been created. It doesn't work. What happened? Okay. Let's send the request again. Operation. Right. Oh, we have not connected our database yet, so let's come back into our backend, and then let's create our config file and say db.js then close this, and let's connect to our database here by bringing in Mongoose. No, we say connect db equals to and sync, and then we bring in our Mongoose. Actually require Mongoose. So we create our con file, con variable, and then we say await mongoose.connect in process.cmv.mongo_URI, which is in a .env file, which is this. All right, so let's come back to our db file, and also let's put it in the try catch just in case there's an error by saying try catch. Yeah, bring this here, and then we take out this rather, then create a try catch and put that in here, and then we console.log the con, which has a connection object, and then say first of all we say database connected, and then we bring in a connection variable which has a connection object, and then a host. And if in an event when there's an error, we would like to also log error.message, and then we exit by saying process.exit what it failed. Then let's export our connect db function by saying module.export equals to our connect db, and then back in our server we then bring in our connect db require should be in a config, and then db. Yeah, then we come in here and we say connect to database, and connect db, run the connect db function, and database connection that undefined. Why do we have that? Alright, what's this? Right. Oh, host. Sorry. Yeah, so we have the database. When you check our terminal, it's database connected to host. Okay. So now let's send off the request again to see if our user will be created. So let's send it. Yeah, works. All right. But before we proceed, I also would want to create a model for the account type, where let's say account model.js const remove mongoose cost require mongoose const account schema equals to new mongoose mongoose.schema, and then we say user type is mongoose.schema.object.types.object ID, and then ref will be user, and then required should be true, and from there we have which will be the name, the details of the user who owns the account, and then from there we can have we have the user account number. Let's say account number type should be a number, and required should be true, and then the balance, that's the balance of the account holder, so the type of, let's say, number, required should be true. Okay, so that's basically it. But we'll do some we generate the account number here, and as well let's have the PIN of the user to authenticate when they are making the transfer. We have a type of number required to be true. Yeah, so we have to generate the account number and then generate the PIN of user. But then let's export the account schema by doing module module.export equals to mongoose.model, let's say account, then you pass the account schema in here. So before we proceed, let us try and then figure out how we can generate the account number and then generate the PIN of the user. But first of all, let us exit this, clear, and then let's create a playground file JS to test account generation function. Then if you're able to successfully get the function working, then we can copy and then paste it into a folder and then use it from there. So let's start by saying console.log generate accounts number. All right, let's run it in that terminal by saying node-mon playground.js. No, it's not node, it's node-mon playground.js. Yeah. What do we have in here? Yeah, okay. Which is generate account number. So first off, what we need to work on is each user should have a unique account number, and then yeah, basically should have a unique account number. So let's say const generate account number should be a function, and then we say console.log gen number. Let's run the generate account number here, and we have our gen number in here. Pretty much straightforward. All right. So first off, since we want it to be a unique number, we can actually use our date function by saying date equals to be date.now, and we run the console.log the date. We should have 177 1744555. But what I want to do is to take the first four numbers by first of all having to convert this into a string by saying date.toString, and when we run the console.log of str date, we should have the same thing, but that should be in a form of a string. And when we do .splice of the from first to four, .slice from the first four, that should give us that. Okay, so the first part has been done by saying that first four should be str date dot slice 0 4. So when we run the console.log of the first four, that should give us 7717 . Okay, that's first part done. Okay, then also let's generate random number between 0 and let's say 1000. Okay, so you can say const random number should be math.floor math.random times 1000 plus 1. So when you can say console.log random number, each time we get different random number as well. Okay, so then to get a unique account number, we can have the first 4 plus the random number, so something like that. But first of all, let's convert this into a string by saying random number dot to string, and we can console.log check how I see a random. Yeah, but we want want it to return an account type of a number. So what we can do is can say const str account should be first 4 plus str, and let's check to see str account to be 2. So we have a 177. So each time we have a each time we generate the account number, we have something like 1704153. But when you try to check the type of, we get a string, but that is not what we want in our account model. We say the account number should be a type of number. All right, so then what we can do is we'll say const account number should be a pass int of str account. Yeah, so in console it's console log of type of account number, we get a number. All right, so then we return account number. Easy breezy. All right, so we have a generate the account number function done, and then also generate pen. Say pen should be say columns to be a pen. The pen should be only 4 numbers in it, so we can do random number should be math for math that's, and still it's multiply by 1000 plus, so that we don't get to 0. So in each situation +1 console log and number. Let's run our generate pen function in here. All right, but let's also add, let's add 1000 here. So we always get something more than 4 numbers. So we then convert this into a string and then take the first 4 numbers, str random number equals to random number dot to string dot slice 0 4 4. Okay, first let's convert into a string first, and then we can then take the first. I don't know why it does that, but I don't know why we can't chain on the function, but in case you know why, what happened in here. Okay, right. So we say str random number should be random number dot to string dot slice 0 4. Does it work? Okay, yeah. So now we say console dot log str random number we always have four numbers. It might not be unique, but since the account numbers are different, we have some level of security based, because two accounts cannot have the same number and then the same pin. Okay, so it should be a type of number, so we can say const pin should be equals to pass int of str random number. So console.log of pin. All right, open. Oh, spell the console wrong. Yeah. So then we return our pin here. All right. So we have the random account number generated here, and then we have our pin also generated here. Perfect. All right, so let's copy these helper functions, cut them from here, come into our backend, and then we create a helper folder. Let's rename this to utils, like utility functions that we can use to help to create. And we can create a new file here and say helper.js, and then we paste it in here. Then we can then export these functions by like this: account number, generate account number, generate pin, like that. Okay, so we don't need this anymore. Okay, so let's close some of the files. We don't need this. We don't need a user route. You keep the user controller open. We don't need a helper for now. So inside the account model, we then can say something like account schema.pre. Before we save the account details, run a function in here, and we say if this dot is, if not this dot is modified account number, this dot account number should be equals to generate. First of all, let's bring the generate account number in here first by importing that's requiring the generate account number equals to require. It should be in the help utils and then helper. Let's generate account number, generate pin. Okay, and I forgot to pass the next middleware in here. First, generate account number, and then this dot, and then we also do that if this dot is modified pin Node.js.pin should equals to generate if generate pin, pass it here, then pass the next in here. Pretty much simple. So first off, before we save, what you're saying in here is I pass in this hook by Mongoose. We have this hook in here where we can say if either either before you save the account, you should have these functions running to generate a pin here, and then account number here. I mean, if this not account number, if it is this dot is not modified, then we generate the account number. If this is not modified, the pin, we generate the pin. Okay, so back into our user controller. First off, let us also create an endpoint where we clear the users by saying request response, and then we await user.delete many. Then we say where's the JSON usage database clear. From there we send our clear users here, which is this one. Then back into our user route. Where do we have the route? Use back into our user route, where we say when we make a delete request, we want clear users, which is imported here. All right. Let's go back into our controllers and then also get the users from the database as well. So we can await user.find, and then let's save this into a variable. Say const users equals to users.find, then we get the list of users, then rest.json, we send back the list of users. Is everything working? We have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. Console.log pane. Oh, I think there's a problem with there's a problem with that pane. That's the issue. Generate pane. That's the other pane. Right. Count model. Oh, we are still running our playground. Good. Alright, so when we send the request to get the list of users, this is what we get back from the database. Oh boy. Evil spirit. Say clear db, which should be a delete request, and then do a http localhost port 5000 users. Then we send the request and database cleared. When we come back to get our users, we don't have anything in our database. Cool. So when we come back into our user controller, what we want to do is that after we've created the user, we also want to create the account in here. So we'll need the user. When we check the account model, what we need is the user account number, PIN, and then the balance. But in this situation, we will do a default of 0. So usually the default balance of the account holder will be 0. All right. So let's go back to the user controller and say const account equals await account dot. First of all, let's bring in the account model. So say const account should be required inside our model, then account model. So should be account dot create, then user will be user dot underscore id, and then the balance is set to default. The account is the account. So what we can do is we can send the user and then the account, something like this. So moment of truth. Moment of truth, let's say if this works, come in here, send request, internal server error. You know what? let us rather not do this here. Let's rather not do this here. Let us rather not do this here. But bring them here. Let's say const yeah. Then say generate account number, generate pen journey. Yeah. Okay. So before say post generate account number and generate pen function like that. Okay. Let's clear the database first and then test it again. We clear it. All right. Let's get a list of users. Oh, okay. And then let's create. Yay! So inside the account, we have the account number to be that, and our PIN, and then our balance, and then the user. Coolly. But before we move on to the next thing, what I want to do is to hash the password of the user. So let's come to the user model. And first of what I want to do is to install bcrypt.js. Yeah, let's just install bcrypt.js like that, and then npm JSON web kin, and then copy parser, something like that. And let's check our package.json to see if bcrypt So inside our user model, we can come in here and say user schema dot pre and save. And the function, it should be an async function actually. Function pasta next. Function. Okay, if that is modify the password. First of all, we want our salt. Let's bring in our bcrypt. Costa Rica crypt.js. Then we can generate our salt by saying await bcrypt. That's then salt. We want 10 of them. How's that? That should be. Sorry. Yeah, okay, cool. Const the hashed password equals to bcrypt.hash, and this the password and our salt. And say this the password equals to hashed password. Then we post our next middleware. Alright, let's clear the database. Clear the database. Oh, okay, so yeah, so if you check the password, it's no longer a plain password which has been hashed here. Cool. Coolly. Okay, then the next thing that I'd want to do is to log in our user by saying equals to sync request response. Then you need a email and password. Request a body and try catch, and we say const equals to await user dot find one email. Then what we can do is console.log error with the message. Then there's a JSON status, let's do 500. Probably there is a problem with the server. Then message and say internal server error. Okay, so in here, if we don't find the user, say if not user, we return and say first dot status, let's do 400, which is about request JSON message and say user not found. If that passes, let's compare the password and say auth equals to await bcrypt. Let's first of all bring in our bcrypt in here by saying equals to require bcrypt.js, like that. And then in here we can do, where is the login? Where are we? Yeah, say bcrypt dot compare password, and then user password. If the passwords are not the same, then rest status 400 .json, and we send a message of invalid. Usually I'll not send, I probably would like to send generic messages, but for the sake of like generic messages, not to give hackers an idea of which part of the code that they have currently reached, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'll rather say invalid credentials. If all of that pass, first of all, I want to set my cookies and then send back user. So before we can use our cookie, we need to come into our server. Then we say cookie parser just to require cookie parser. Then inside our middleware, we set cookie parser like this. So back into our user controller, what we can do is to then generate, first of all, what we can do is to generate token, set cookies, send back the user. So to generate the token, we can say const JWT will be require JSON web token, and we need a secret for the JSON web token. So what we can do is to write JWT secret. You can use any secrets that you want, but for now I'll do ABC 1 2 3 4 ABC. Yeah. So since we touched on the environment variable, we need to restart our server and write npm and server. Okay, that's working. So let's close some of the, we don't need this. We don't need the account model. We don't need the user model. Basically, we are working here. Okay, where are we? All right. So generate token, and say const token should be JWT dot sign ID equals to user dot underscore ID. Yeah, and then we need our key, the secret.env.jwt secret in here. Alright, so that generates our token for us, and then we set by a cookie by res.key jwt, then we pass our token, and after that we status s2 200.json, then we pass the user in here. Okay, cool. So let's go over the code. So let's try and comment out some of the code that we've written, so it won't be clear users. Let's clear the database. This one will be login user. So with our login user, what we require from the user is the request, the email, and then the password, which we get from the requester body. And then we'll use the email to find the user. If we don't get the user, we return a status of 400 in a JSON with a message of user not found. Then if the user is found, we try and then compare the password, because bear in mind it is not a plain password, the password has been encrypted. And then if it is true, usually the bcrypt compare will return either a true or a false boolean. And then if it is not the same, if they are not the same, we would rather return a status of 400 and say invalid credentials. And then if all of these things passes, we will then have to generate our JWT token, which we will set, and then we pass the ID of the user, and then we need the secret, and then from there we set the cookie, and then we send back the user. In a situation where there is an error, we console.log error, the return status of 500, then a message of server. Alright. So we pass the login user here, and then our endpoint will probably login user. Okay. So let's go back into our route. What is it? User route, and we do router.post. Bear in mind, it should be a post required because we are passing in the email and then the password, and then we do our login user. So you then require the login user here. So when there's a router, when there's a request to, when there's a post request to user/login, you would want to use the login controller. All right, let's go back here and test out the endpoint and say login user. So it should be a post request. And then should be HTTP localhost port 5000 users login, and then content type will be application JSON. Then inside the body we have an email, should be kofiahin@gmail.com, and then the password should be password. Basically we are trying to authenticate this. Okay, so moment of truth. Usually when you're trying to make a separate request, you bring in double, triple hashtags. Then we send the request, and it works. So let's try and then send an invalid password. Let's say ABC SSS. This send, and then invalid credentials. Let's send a wrong email address. Send. User not found. Great. So now we have our user login. Let's also do the logout. So inside the controller, we can say const logout user. Should it be an async? No, we need a request first, and then we can do res.cookie jwt. We sent it into an empty string, and then max age should be pretty short, like 1, like that, and then return says that JSON message user logged out, like that. Should be AWT, should be empty. Yeah. So logout user, like that. So back into our user route, we can say router dot get logout. Want to do logout user. Boom. All right, so let's go back into our request.rest file and say logout user, and should be a get request. And, oh, come on. Get request into a HTTP localhost port 5000 users logout. Send request, user logged out. Thank you. All right. So what we also would want to do is to check if the user has been authenticated. So what I mean is, let's say there's a get requests of something like profile. What I want to do is to get the user who has logged in. So let's say get profile, something like this. Okay, so we then have to run get profile, which we will get an error because the get profile has not been created. All right, so we can come in here and say const get profile request res.json, and then we do a message of get profile, like that. Then we export the get profile function, and everything works. So back into our request.rest, what I want to do is get profile of the person that has been logged in. So then again we do HTTP local host got 5,000 users and then profile, something like that. So you can only hit this endpoint if you've been logged in, but for now you've not written that part of the code, but let's check to see if that endpoint works. HTTP localhost about 5,000 users. Wait, what do we have? What problem do you have? How to get this? Alright, so HTTP local send request. Okay. Oh, forgot our double slash. First. Alright. So that hits the endpoint, but what we'd rather would want to do is rather create a middleware function to check to see if the user has been logged in first, then we send the details to back to the user who has made the request. I don't know if that makes sense. All right, then what we can do is create an auth.js file. Then first all we need is our JWT JSON web token. And then I would say close auth, it will take, prop should be an receiving function, request response, and then the next, and then we say let can be that, and then we have a try catch, and then we say const token should be, you know what, let's take off this. Token should be equals to requested cookies. That's JWT, like that. So say if not token, we return and say status of 401, which is not authorized, to pass a JSON sage and say not authorized. But if we have the token, okay, let's do this one. Return status for one.json message not authorized, no token, like that. All right, if we do not have the token, return and say same thing. Then all right, if we have the token, we need to decode the token by saying jwt.verify our token, and then we need a jwt secret, which will decode the token. I know I'm saying lots of things. So we then can get the ID from the token, but then again, we also would need the user as well. So you can say const, because the user model, you need a model, user model, like that. All right, so back in here, we can then find can get our ID by deconstructing this, by saying ID like that. So find user, we can say user equals to, it's user dot find by ID, the ID here. So if not user return and rest the status 400 bad request and JSON and pass a message. Oh, come on. User not found. But if the user is found, we say request.user equals to the user, then we move on to the next middleware. All right. All right, let's go over the code. What we can do is, first of all, require the JWT, find the user model, and then we initialize our auth function, pass the request response with the next middleware. We try to get the token from the request.cookie.jwt. If we don't get the token, sets a status of 401 with a message of not authorized. Then we get the ID with the JWT by verifying the token with the JWT secret. And then if we get the ID, since we are doing the try and catch, if there's an error, we return errors the status 401 message not authorized. All right, so if not user returns the 400 JSON message user not found, then if there is the user, we say request.user to be equals to user, and then move on to the next middleware. All right, so then I have to export auth middleware. So how then do we use this? We then have to come back into our user route and then import our auth middleware in here and say const auth should be required from middleware and then auth. Everything Gucci. So inside our profile, before we hit this controller, we then have to pass our auth here Before then, so we had this auth middleware first to check to see if the user is logged in. Then we get the profile. So back in the get profile, the profile of the user should be on the request.user, like that. Okay, moment of truth. Let's send this request. Not authorized, we do not have a token. Okay, then let's log in first. Okay, we have logged in now. Now let's try and send a request to get the profile. Yay. Gucci man. But in here, what I want to do is I don't want to send the password of the user. So what I can do is to say select minus password. Okay. So back in here, we send, yeah, then we don't have a password. Cool. All right. So the next thing that you do is to probably create how to make the transfer, make the transaction request, which we will handle that later in the next tutorial. All right, so thank you for watching and see you the next time. And don't forget to always keep pushing. All right, thank you, bye.